It is hard to deny that the 2020s have been ruled by a generation of promising horror filmmakers, and I am not the only one who has noticed this. No doubt, in this decade we've got horror films like Nosferatu, Together, Bring Her Back, and many such films, which made us absolutely fall in love with horror movies that do not just rely upon jump scares. I mean, that's the exact reason why we loved Possession. And since we are talking about meaningful horror films, how can we forget about Damien McCarthy, the one who has quickly built a reputation through 3 eerie supernatural horror films. First, the fan favorite Caveat, which had us glued to our seats and biting our nails. Second, we got Oddity, again, a film based on a very nightmarish concept, and then add that scary haunted wooden golem to it. Fast forward to 2026, and we get yet another horror film from Damien McCarthy. This time, a film about folklore and witches. And accurately enough, this film is titled Hokum. No wonder why it gave us one of the most terrifying witches of modern horror cinema. Tighten your belts, my dear friends, because this video is going to shine a light upon how the witch in Hokum comes out to be one of the most terrifying and unconventional witches you've ever seen. If you haven't watched the movie yet, there are a few spoilers in this video, so check whether it is still playing near you, because this video will contain spoilers.
It's just people with closed minds. Can't see him.
Hokum's Witch, Hollywood's most terrifying witch. Before discussing the witch in the Damien McCarthy directorial, let's talk a little bit about the synopsis of this film. Hokum plays like a folk horror haunted hotel story with supernatural and gothic touches, especially because it is associated with folklore and witches. And while we do not exactly see that the story is set in an Elizabethan or Victorian era, like many traditional gothic horror stories, it still carries a gothic supernatural mood, however, with a sprinkle of psilocybin. And not to forget, it stars Severance fame Adam Scott as this prickly writer, Bauman. So, if you loved Mark Scout in Severance, then you will absolutely enjoy seeing Adam Scott take on Bauman too. Our protagonist is suffering from writer's block. Of course, the opening itself is a scary scene for people who are writers and just love writing. He is struggling with writing an epilogue to the last part of his successful Conquistador trilogy. We see that he's trying to give a bad ending to the story, but he just can't. At the same time, he's dealing with internal guilt, that of having killed his mother accidentally with his father's gun. So decides to travel to an isolated inn where his parents honeymooned so that he can scatter their ashes. Ridiculously enough, following the disappearance of one of the inn's employees, the film starts to focus on Ohm facing his own demons while also encountering the primary absurdity, or hokum, of this movie: the presence of a witch. Of course, the film's title, Hokum, is completely accurate, considering that we see Ohm completely pissed off while hearing the area's folklore and calling it absolute nonsense, because that's what the meaning of the word hokum is. Nonsense, bunk, untrue. And that hokum feeling prevalent in this movie gets boosted by the fact that so much of what happens in this movie appears to be drug-fueled. And the witch, she is at the heart of this movie. She looks absolutely terrifying. And on top of that, the atmosphere of this movie is otherworldly. See, we know little to nothing about the witch's origins. All we get to know from whatever Mr. Cobb says in the beginning of the movie about the witch is that she targets little boys and takes the most valuable part of their body from them, and that itself opens us to many interpretations regarding this witch. When a man commits any hell-worthy sins, especially committing femicide, a theme that is prevalent throughout this movie, the witch captures them, takes the valuable parts from their body, and then drags them to hell with her. And since we are talking about how Hokum's witch is one of the most terrifying and ghastly forces coming from a horror movie, it's important to first note what exactly makes the witch pretty different compared to the other witches shown in Hollywood. What makes the Hokum witch different? If you are someone who is an ardent fan of the horror genre, I am pretty sure that you have watched Hocus Pocus too. It was this female-centric horror comedy about witches. And even while comparing a horror movie like Hokum with Hocus Pocus is more of a blasphemy, especially because Hokum deals with the psychological conflict of the protagonist and is not your regular horror movie, definitely not a horror comedy, it is still essential to note how Hocus Pocus helped cement one very pop-cultural version of witches for modern audiences. Campy, theatrical, cackling, glamorous old hags who always get in cahoots and scare the shit out of mortals. Even in cartoon shows, we see witches moving around with a broom and their feline companion taking over Halloween night. Unfortunately, all these unrealistic depictions do not align with the more complex depictions of witches and magical women found in ancient mythologies. Let me tell you why. If we travel back to the times when Mesopotamian civilization existed, magic was not always treated treated as cartoonish evil. Ritual experts, healers, and exorcistic practitioners existed alongside fears of harmful sorcery. And yes, not every figure associated with magic was malevolent. Not at all. Have you heard of Circe? She was commonly described as an enchantress or sorceress, and she was a divine sorceress. See, not all witches are these Baba Yagas who have malicious intents, even if they do exist. At the same time, if you explore the stories of witches or sorceresses like Circe and Medea, you will find this common thing in many of them. They serve as stories that tell you about the danger of female power, especially when men violate them by any means. Circe transformed men into pigs, while Medea used magic for vengeance against men. Plus, if you look at some scholarly interpretations, they argue that witches often became a representation of patriarchal anxiety about female autonomy, because they were way beyond the definitions of women as virtuous mothers and wives. Certainly, if we look back at these historical and mythological ideas, bringing together the puzzle pieces becomes a lot easier, especially because Hokum is about femicide. Plus, the Hokum witch is not just a ghost that makes you shit your pants, but also has a thematic significance, which I will definitely discuss in this video as we proceed. So yes, the witch in Hokum is definitely not this mean witch, an old hag who cackles and flies around, the kind that fits into the stereotypical depiction of witches. Instead, we see the witch in Hokum as a symbolic force. We see her as this representation of psychological terror, guilt, trauma, paranoia, and hellish afterlife. And most importantly, she is grounded in Irish folklore blended with a fairy tale gone wrong Hail the Shrooms aesthetic and not sensational magic. To understand this, let's discuss Robert Eggers' The Witch. See, I already mentioned Robert Eggers' Nosferatu in the beginning. That movie also leans into period Gothic dread, plague imagery, and a woman placed at the center of a monstrous curse. In that movie too, we see a female character at the center of the story. And if you are someone who has followed Robert Eggers' filmography devotedly, allow me to recall his 2015 film, The Witch. Starring Anya Taylor-Joy, this film is set in 1630s New England, inside a Puritan family collapsing under fear, isolation, and religious paranoia. It was not exactly a gothic horror movie though. It was a folk horror film actually, but just like Hokum, this movie also oozes dread and despair, as we see witches existing as not just another ghost material, but as thematically significant elements. More so because witchcraft has a huge connection with Thomasin, the eldest daughter in the Puritan family who navigates the stereotypes. If I put things plainly, The Witch is not just another movie about folklore and shit. It is about female liberty. And while Hokum doesn't exactly explore female liberty, because it explores femicide, it still does depict how it's a women's world, especially by centering on mostly male characters. I mean, I get it. Damien McCarthy has himself said that it was a very tough script to write. To quote what he said, "It was definitely the hardest script I've ever written. It seemed to take 2+ years and went through so many drafts. I knew I just wanted it to be about this character and just trying to punish him over the course of this night, and there was still just something missing and it wasn't working." With that being said, let's move on to our next topic. The character design. You want to know what exactly the inspirations behind her design are? Yes, you guessed it right. It's the mushroom trip. It stands out as a major feature in this movie, and also a major inspiration behind the character and costume design, for its main purpose is to create ambiguity around whether the witch is real or not, and whether everything taking place in the movie is actually happening, or is all just the hallucinatory outcome. And this can all be seen through the fact that this is incorporated into the physical design of the character too. Her hair color, the texture of her skin, all reflect the different species of mushrooms, as explicitly mentioned by McCarthy in his interview with Collider. Lots and lots of just different species of mushrooms. And looking at that and seeing, is there a way to weave this into her color, into the texture of her skin, into her hair? I thought it would maybe hint a little bit like, is she really there? Is this actually happening? Is this something that whatever's in his system is creating? And again, with that, it was also to lean into your very typical fairy tale look of a classic witch. We're not trying to invent anything brand new. It's like, no, let's actually go with that classic design on top of all of the mushroom angle. Shout out to Laura Campbell. Without her efforts, the physical design of the witch definitely would not have had the same kind of substance in it, and the whole point of the film would have disintegrated. Plus, Hokum also teaches that a collaboration between a costume designer and the writer-director is, of course, a must. So now we have this question. is the witch actually real? And was Jerry right? Who even is Jerry? I have a theory. This statement is what is surely expected from anyone who has just finished watching Hokum. And since McCarthy has also said that this movie is open to many interpretations, the film's ending, of course, deserves many rewatches. Because since the mushroom trip happens throughout the primary part of this movie, a possible interpretation does point to the fact that everything happening in the movie may not be fully real at all, and may primarily be Adam Scott's character dealing with a drug-fueled hallucination, especially the Jack the Jackass moment, which seems far more clearly tied to Ohm's drug-fueled nightmare logic than to the witch's folklore. But then again, did we just forget about Jerry, that guy who lives inside a van and takes shrooms? Damian McCarthy himself loves David Wilmot's character as much as we do, especially because it injects a little bit of hope, or maybe somebody could come to rescue him, because if it's just him, there really is no way out without some kind of a deus ex machina, something coming in at the end to solve it. So yeah, I think introducing that extra character seemed to crack it. But besides providing companionship to Ohm, what else is the aim behind including a character like Jerry, of course, and spoon-feeding the audience about the possible presence of the witch? Let me repeat, the film thrives due to the theme of femicide, of course, because we see three male characters, the protagonist Ohm, the hotel employee Mal, and Jerry, who have killed women, but due to different reasons. And this is what makes them susceptible to the witch's curse. And if we recall Jerry's action, compared to Mal, who actually had cruel intentions, what Jerry commits is mercy killing. He kills his wife because she was suffering from a disease, but then again, he admits that he could see his wife thanking him after he took drugs, essentially saying the drugs are a gateway to the spiritual world. Plus, the witch being real is hinted at by this other thing too. The director says that if you're seeing anything from Ohm's point of view, if something is reflected in his glasses during the reverse shot, that tells you what is real and what is not. So, does that prove the witch is real? Not completely, but it gives the audience enough evidence to argue that the supernatural side of Hokum is more than just a hallucination. But was Jack the Jackass a real entity? He seems far more clearly tied to the trip, because we do not get to see that he has any sort of connection with the witch. And here's an important thing that we cannot miss out on. The witch is not really a villain in this movie. Then who is the main villain in this movie? It's of course Mal, who works at the hotel and is also Mr. Cobb's son-in-law. He's that man in the movie. You absolutely hate seeing him every time he pops up on the screen. You see him keep on committing many cruel acts without any guilt. He literally killed a woman, in this case the missing employee whose name is Fiona, because he had impregnated her and did not want his domestic life to be destroyed. But what's more confusing for me, and for all others too, is looking for an answer to how Fiona exactly died. Did she die due to starvation in the honeymoon suite, or at the hands of the witch? Or did she actually see the witch, hide herself, and then die due to a heart attack? So many questions. Regardless of what the actual answer is, Mal still comes out as an active menace throughout the movie, showing no guilt and actually doubling down over and over again. Perhaps this is what makes the witch really terrifying. She doesn't come out as an overt force haunting Ohm and the other characters, but as a force of nature and an allegory of mortality and tragic fate. And undoubtedly, her being a secondary antagonist compared to the cold-blooded Mal doesn't diminish the scare factor that she promises, given the mystery surrounding her. No doubt, Mr. Cobb has great knowledge, not just because he is old-aged, which makes him prone to have a great idea about the area's folklore, but also because he reveals that he has captured her and contained her within the isolated honeymoon suite that nobody is allowed to enter. And even if this is not fully elaborated on, we do come to the conclusion that all of this may have actually happened. In plain words, the witch's tight association with both psilocybin, which serves as a gateway to witnessing the supernatural forces, and also the area's folklore, makes her a terrifying ghost. And it's not just her physical traits or the design or the jump scares or her speaking in foreign languages which intimidates the audience. However, at the same time, the witch acts as a philosophical agent too. So, does that mean the witch has a thematic significance? The witch's thematic significance. Exactly, and that is proven from the very fact that she takes a valuable part from the little boys before dragging them to hell with her. And we also see that she doesn't exactly punish Ohm like she does Mal, especially because the crime from his side was accidental and out of innocence. Consequently, symbolically it feels as if the witch takes the guilt that has chained Ohm to that childhood trauma. So, when the witch punishes Mal and not Ohm, whom she embraces and forgives after he tearfully apologizes, that clarifies the witch's possible true purpose in the story. Even while she is hungry for the souls of the men who have committed brutal crimes, she is also there to teach a lesson to Ohm and free him from the lifelong guilt which led him to commit suicide in the beginning of the movie. And this ties to how Ohm finally gets over his traumatic experiences, believing that his late mother has forgiven him, and decides to write a hopeful epilogue for his famous book trilogy. Personal thoughts. As someone who loves horror movies that break conventions, I was entirely in love with whatever was going on in this film. But what makes it more fascinating is that as much as people love this movie, they are also coming up with more interpretations and speculations surrounding the witch in this movie. One of my favorites is, of course, the fans connecting Ohm with Albie, two oblivious characters who cannot read a room. If you also have come up with some new interpretations regarding the witch and the ending of this film, then you can write them down in the comments. Also, if you enjoyed this video, and the movie too, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon to never miss any updates. Until then, we promise that we will see you guys in the next video with a more fascinating topic to talk about. See you later.